Greetings and welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel, where we're just going to do a quick video talking about some natural dyeing today. Now, I do want to give you a little bit of context. This is part of a larger project. We are in the process of prototyping a backpack, right? A camping backpack. This is going to be kind of a hybrid design that's inspired jointly by the Bergens pack and by the Yucca pack. So we're cutting out pieces, experimenting with design, working on drawing patterns, and I'm surrounded by canvas. Okay, and this canvas is it's not quite true white. It's sort of an eggshell, but it's very, very light colored compared to, you know, the woodsy outdoor colors that I want it to be. So before I go into sewing this canvas, I want to dye it. And I'm going to do that with walnut hulls. Okay? Now, we've done some stuff with walnut hulls before on the channel. We've done walnut hull ink. Here we're going to do a walnut hull dye for this canvas and also the strapping. Right? So we have some webbing that's going to make a couple different parts. So what I did is I took my material and weighed it, and then weighed out 1/4 the mass of the material in these dry walnut hulls. Okay, I forgot to weigh the webbing, so it's 1/4 less the webbing. But what I'm going for is a nice light woodsy tan color. Okay, so if it comes out a little too light, we can always over dye with a darker batch. But if we go too dark and turn it, you know, like a really, like, you know, dark burgundy color, we can't then lighten it up, right? So, and I don't want it to go, you know, close to black. I want a nice light tan. So we're starting with about 1/4 the weight of fabric in walnut hulls. So the preparation for this is to drop everything, okay, is to take these and a pot of water. The pot of water is filled up to about here. Only needs to be enough water to submerge the cloth. And we're simply going to knock these holes into there and put this on a burner and let it come to a hard rolling boil for a couple of hours. Okay, so we're going to do a long extraction, several hours of boiling. Okay. And then the cloth itself, we're going to take and we're going to soak. So while those hulls are boiling in that nice big pot of water, we're going to take this cloth, soak it up, and then, you know, wring it out and let it just lay so that it all takes an even moisture content. The reason we're doing that is to help prevent splotchiness in the dye. So if you take this absolutely dry and stick it right in, you're going to have just, like, you know, a slurp up effect right off the bat. And that can lead to lines and blotches and unevenness in the color. But if we soak it all up with water, then the dye molecules are going to have to diffuse into an already wet material rather than just being slurped up right away. And that will help it come out more even in color, right? So I'm going to get this soaking and that boiling, and then we'll look at it again together. So we've been boiling these hulls for 4 or 5 hours or so, and now it's time to put the cloth in. So I'm going to dump this into a bucket that had a little water in it, because we need to make sure that there's enough water in here that all these things can float, okay, and move around. If they're stacked up against each other, you'll have light spots and dark spots, and again, uneven. Okay, so just added a little bit extra water there. You can always put more in later. I don't want to have too much and overfill the bucket and lose some of my stuff, right? So now we're just going to put these in. But I'm going to put them in one at a time and make sure that they're going in a way that they're not wadded up. Okay, so I'm going to be very careful make sure that they're all folded out and happy. These are all slightly moist. Those are going to be supports for the internal frame. Webbing for the straps. There goes the bottom. There's a side. Again, I just want to make sure that it's all getting coated. There's the second side. This canvas is interesting. It actually gets harder when it's wet. Less flexible. Because the weave is so tight, when it gets wet, it expands and it's real rigid. There's the front going in. These will be pockets in the front flap. So you can put a poncho in and access it easily without having to undo your whole pack. It's a feature on the Yucca pack. We're going to include in ours. And then there's the back and the main flap. This is one full bucket. Something big like this, again, we want to stick it in. Pull it out a couple times, make sure it's getting evenly wetted, and you can see the, kind of shade that it's going to take over time. Okay. So now we'll let this soak an hour, and then I'll pull it all out and put it all in again, just to mush it up a little bit. Okay, and we'll do that several times tonight, and then we'll let it soak in here for a full 24 hours to take the stain. I hope that you're enjoying this content, and if you are, I would love to invite you to join our Patreon page and the community over there. The Patreon and that funding is super important for this channel as well as most YouTube channels. It just takes resources to do these things, to buy materials, to go on trips, to go interview people, to do activities, and we're trying to build and make the channel better in all of those categories. So we're super grateful for everybody who's already there. And if you would like to come and join the ranks of those folks, we have a lot of rewards for the folks who do join on the Patreon. We have a large repository of historic information on traditional skills that have been re-indexed and edited and produced in easy-to-print formats and formats that are easy to put into a page reader. And it's indexed by skill rather than all of the random ways that it was indexed in the past, so you could access what you want. We also have a lot of plans and patterns for various projects, like this shoulder bag that we're going to replicate here soon. The fur stretchers behind me are another example, and all of that library becomes an infinite access resource to you when you join the Patreon at any of the paid tiers, even at $1 a month. If you don't want to join that way, they can be purchased as individual downloads as well. And we're just so grateful for everybody who's there and wanted to invite you. So, hope to see you there, but I also hope you're joining this video, which we'll get back to right now. Here we go. So this has been a little bit more than 24 hours, just because we were busy yesterday and I didn't get back to it. But you can see the nice, lovely, just a traditional neutral brown color that these walnut hulls have dyed this cloth. So now the next thing we need to do is just wash off all of the loose dye. So I'm going to take these out, I'm going to dump out this bucket, I'm going to refill it with water and just soak them clean in water for about a half a day. We're moving along, so I took these and washed them in 2 different changes of water. And I rinsed them out. I literally took them into our house shower, rinsed each piece off in the shower to get some of the, dust. One of the things about dyeing with walnut hulls is they're a dusty source of dye, right? There's a lot of sugars and a lot of just plant stuff that comes off of the hulls that will kind of sit on the surface and make them look a little darker than they're actually going to be. So I rinsed them off and then soaked them for a couple hours in a bucket of clean cold water and then dumped that out and did it again. So we're trying to do two things. One is get rid of all of the unadhered dye molecules and just, detritus. We don't want that. And second, we need to neutralize these. So tanning tanning cellulose can help prevent fungus growth. But large amounts of residual acidity will degrade the cellulose. Okay? This is true of paper, this is true of rope, this is true of cloth. So, back in the days of, the days of sail, ship's ropes were often tanned. But then you often need to, then you need to remove the excess acidity somehow, because excess acidity is what makes paper yellow and get brittle over time. So we need to get rid of any residual acid because walnut hulls are high in tannic acid. So the rinses did most of that work, but we're going to do a final process here. And that is to take these and dip them and wash them again in some baking soda water. Okay? So this bucket I have here is just a little over half full, and it's got a cup of baking soda dissolved in it. Baking soda is very gentle. It is one of the chemicals that has this really nice property of not being able to dissolve at too high of a concentration. Right, so you can't screw up with it. I just have about a cup in about a half a bucket. That's all the more precise that you need to be. Just a couple handfuls of it in half a bucket of water. You're going to be close enough. And this is what paper conservators in libraries and museums use for treating yellowed paper. Right, baking soda water. So we're going to take each of these pieces and dip them in here. Now we got two different shades out. The canvas is a little bit lighter than I wish it was. I wish it was just a little bit of one shade darker. And the strapping came out exactly what I was hoping for. It's not at all uncommon to have two different shades out of the same dye lot in two slightly different fabrics. Even though they're both cotton, to different weave, different treatment, different source, right? They dyed a little bit differently, but it's okay. And if I just put the original on here, you can see the change from the white cotton canvas to the dyed cotton canvas. So we just wanted not jarringly white. We have achieved that. If you want a darker shade, go to an equal quantity of walnut hulls to fabric. An equal mass. And if you want a really dark shade, you could go maybe double the mass, right? You can adjust that. But each batch is going to come out a little bit differently. So this piece is cut out for the bottom of our backpack. It's dry. We're just going to take it and we're going to rinse it and soak it up good here in this baking soda water. And this heavy duck canvas is really interesting when it gets wet. The weave is designed so tight that when it gets fully soaked, it swells up and almost starts to feel like plywood. It's really crazy. Feel that, beloved?
Yeah.
And then feel one that's dry.
That's very different.
I know, it's crazy. But that's one of the attributes of it that make it so good for this kind of project. Because if it gets wet, yes, it'll absorb water initially, but when it seals up like this, it will start to shed further water. So it's a natural built-in, I'm not going to say waterproof, because it will absorb. but only to a point. And then it repels further water from penetrating. Okay, there's your side. We're just going to keep doing this with each of these pieces. Dipping them, soaking them up. And then when we're all done, we'll put these on a drying rack and let them hang to dry. This will leave a little bit of residue. There will be a little bit of baking soda powder that, forms and stays inside of the cloth. So for a while, eventually that will slough off and wash off and move out with humidity, right? It's not a forever thing, but it will further prevent any residual acidity from harming our cloth. And if you're using an acid dye on a cotton substrate, this is an important step. I will add a caution with that. There are some, if you're getting into colored dyes, some of the reds and blues that are anthocyanin based are also pH sensitive. So if you do this to them, you can change them from red to blue. Or vice versa, depending on the dye and what direction you're taking the pH. So that's actually, interestingly, that's why the snail juice purple was so valuable in the ancient world, because it's pH stable. Whereas the other purples, like the lichen-based purple dyes, will turn red with, if you sweat on them, they can change color. Change color in your shirt. And we're going to do the same thing with the strapping. The other thing I wanted to say while I'm just finishing this up is there's a second weak base that is used by conservators in exactly the same way, and that's borax. Borax will also help neutralize that residual acidity and leave a slight residue so that, if you miss anything, it's there in place to keeping things safe. It has the added advantage of being very strongly antifungal. So for the period of time that borax dust kind of stays hanging around, it will help keep, mildew at bay. And, again, conservators do quite a lot of work with borax. I'm using this because when I've used borax in some of my tanning projects, I've had some people note that in some countries they couldn't get it and were asking me what else they could use. So I wanted to use the baking soda because, as far as I know, there's no regulations on baking soda. Borax got kind of a bad rap for toxicity. And it is toxic in large enough doses, but everything's toxic in a large enough dose. This needs a little bit more. The toxicity from borax is primarily gastrointestinal upset. And back in the Industrial Revolution era, when there were no food regulations, no FDA or equivalent. If you're not in the United States, you don't have an FDA, but you have some equivalent agency that's conducting oversight on food safety. And before there was any oversight on food safety, people were taking milk that had spoiled, taking it off the shelf, mixing it with borax because it absorbs the off flavors, and then reselling it as fresh milk. And they were using copious amounts of borax, and people were getting dysentery-like symptoms from it. And that's obviously not good, especially when it's being used for babies' milk and the babies are dying from the dysentery. So that practice led to quite a few infant mortality events and got borax just blanket banned by a few places. But it's So, yes, there is a toxicity there, but that's a pretty extreme, right? We're talking, you know, large quantities over long periods of time in very small bodies to have that really horrible outcome. So, if you're using a little bit of borax carefully in a project that you're never going to eat, it certainly can be used safely, but like anything, you have to know what it is, why you're using it, and what the limits are before you go to town with something. That's true of anything. So, a little bit of an aside, but I thought I would note that doing this with borax is an option. Make sure your pets and people don't drink the water. Right? I don't think anybody's gonna eat a piece of canvas. Huh?
Yummy.
Nom nom canvas. Okay, so I'm gonna finish dipping these. I will let them sit wet for a little bit to fully make sure they're fully saturated. Hang them out to dry, and then with better lighting, I'll show you what the final colors look like. Final reveal on the colors. I just wanted to come outside here in the nice daylight so that you can get the true daylight tone of the dye. So this is completely finished. This is after we did the baking soda little, neutralization bath. And you can see how much darker the cotton webbing came out relative to the fabric, even though these were in exactly the same dye bath. So it really shows how you'll get very different, you'll get a lot of variation from one material to another. Different tightnesses of weave, different sources of cotton, I don't know, maybe different treatments. I didn't do any pre-mordanting on these because it's usually not necessary with walnut, but maybe something in the treatment of this led it to taking a little bit more dye than the other. And just for sake of comparison, this little strip is a cutoff of the original canvas color so that you can see the change. And I'm very happy with it. I just wanted a light. I wasn't looking for a really dark brown. I just wanted a really light tone, but not glaringly white, because that stands out a lot in the woods when you're hunting. And I always kind of think about these things as I might take it hunting someday, and I just didn't want shockingly white. So we have achieved not shockingly white, which was the goal. And I hope that this helps you, think through this a little bit and see an example of a natural dye being used on what will become a real product. We're still in the prototyping phase for a backpack, but I wanted to show you one of the ones that's one of our examples is this Bergen pack. Okay, this is the pack that we're going to make out of this is taking some inspiration from the Bergen pack and some inspiration from the Boy Scout Yucca pack. So it's going to be kind of a hybrid of those two. And I hope that you'll come along for the journey as we continue prototyping. We'll start sewing in the next video and work through. And of course, at the point that plans are finalized, the patterns for this will be made available on our Patreon, as all of the patterns that we use on this channel are. So I hope that you're having a wonderful day and have had a wonderful holiday season, and we'll see you here next time for more backpack work on Old Ways Rising Farm.